Hi everyone, thank you for joining us for another filmmaker Q&A. We have Katie here, who's the director of In Orbit, so I hope that you've watched the film. If not, I would suggest going to watch the film first over on the website and then joining us back here for the Q&A. I'm going to pass over to Katie and to hear more about their filmmaking, and if you want to send any questions as well to us for In Orbit, we can pass them on to Katie as well. So, hi Katie, thank you for joining us today. And
hi, thanks for having me. Cool. So I'm the director of In Orbit. It's my first film. I wrote it, directed it, produced it, edited it, even though I had no idea what I was doing, and I lost my VFX guy after 3 months. So I had to teach myself how to use After Effects and finish all the effects myself as well. So this wasn't like my first child. It turned into a teenager very quickly. It was just so difficult to deal with. But yeah, as I said, it's my first film. It was one of those things where, like a lot of writers, I think, when you write, particularly in Ireland, because we've got so many schemes, which is like brilliant, you end up writing a lot like for other directors or like toward other subjects that, you can do a good job with them, but it mightn't necessarily be what you're interested in. And so eventually I got so tired of that I started to write this queer film, and it was something that like I found very interesting, and it was something that ended up evolving about LGBT love in older people as opposed to people my own age. Like I was only 26, I think, when I started writing this, and 28 by the time I directed it. And the reason I ended up directing it, I think, is because I got so attached to the script and I felt I'd put so much of myself into it, and I was so kind of upset in waves, and it was a very kind of like self-healing process writing it, because although it's about someone who's much, much older than me, being 80 years old, being interviewed about the greatest achievement of her life and looking back at when that happened at age 40, like that achievement being like just to see yourself as you are and to love yourself as you are, it was a very healing process for me as well. But I suppose, yeah, like as I said, it's my first film. It premiered at the Galway Film Festival here in Ireland. Then went on to the Gays Film Festival in Dublin, which is a really good one. It's the only dedicated film festival we have for LGBT films, and it won Best Irish Short at that. And then it's gone on to do a couple of big ones in Ireland, like Catalyst is a diverse film festival as well, and won Spirit of the Festival at that. It's gone all over Europe. It's been to like Chile and Slovakia. It's in the States at the moment. It did Lexicon first. They went on to do Minneapolis, St. Paul's. We're doing Newport and an Outfest as well from next Sunday, which I'm delighted about. So thankfully it's traveling really, really well, which I wasn't expecting. I'm really delighted with it.
Thank you very much, and congratulations on all the festivals.
Cheers.
And thank you for sharing it with us. We really loved it, and it was great to be able to screen it and to chat with you about it. I'd like to know more about why it was a topic that you particularly wanted to explore, especially with an older gay character.
Yeah, I think, as I said, like I started off writing something that I just wanted to be about my experience. And I think the problem, and like the brilliant thing and the limitation about having films about queer people is that, oftentimes it's an internal experience and it's something that starts very, very young. And the thing about that is film is a visual medium, but that experience and how early it starts, it's often something that you can't see. And you experience it at an age where expressing your feelings is really, really hard, So I think a lot of people end up carrying this forward through their lives. There's always a little twist of it there. It's very hard to talk about it and to explain what it is. And for me, the main thing growing up, I'm very androgynous and feeling slightly out of place, but not really cottoning on why until quite late, is that you always feel like you're in someone else's world. You feel like you see it different to everyone else. You feel like everyone else is just like in sync and in rhythm, and you're outside of that rhythm. So like the name In Orbit comes from someone who feels like they're orbiting everyone else's world and they're not a part of it. But also it's to do with vision and the way you see yourself, like your eyes are in your orbital sockets, I suppose. And I suppose what I learned as I got older, especially like with the marriage referendum and stuff like that a lot of the perception and how you look at the world, although it's not fair, it has to come from yourself. So like in my film, like Maura is 40 years old and she meets this woman and she falls in love, and the entire film is a very simple, like, will I go with her or won't I? Like, will I let myself experience this or not? And it takes Maura changing how she looks at herself for the world to then look differently. Like I've cut the sky out of every shot to make it look like she's in her own world when she's in kind of 2019, 2020. But then when she's 80 and she's looking back, the world looks quite different. And that's why there's such a division there, because I feel like as LGBT people, like we can spend so much of our lives literally feeling like you're in one world in one place, and then you finally do a bit of work on yourself or work on how you feel about it, and you actually do feel like you're in a different world. So like on top of getting across that emotion and that loneliness and that disengagement, I was looking around at like Netflix, and Irish film and European film and all these cool films we have at like 25, 26, and I realized like everyone on there was young, with the exception of a few, but everyone on there was young. And I just thought, God, like, I'm missing the history of this experience. I'm missing the history of the people that went before me. And like, I love all these like documentaries about how people have fought, and but they're quite negative in a way. So I suppose I felt guilty then wanting to show someone my own age on screen. I just thought like there has to be more in this than me. And maybe selfishly being that young, writing someone slightly older having this experience, I am writing myself the history that I want. I want to see that people can do this. Like I want to see people in their 80s holding hands. I want to see people in their 40s knowing that they can do it, because the marriage referendum in Ireland in particular, like it did quite a lot, but it's not the band-aid that's fixed everything. I think maybe some people thought it was or assumed it has been, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And how did you decide on the traits of the characters and develop them and ultimately find the, I guess, 3 main actors for the roles?
Yeah, I knew that I wanted it to look, again, like, although the world itself looks quite different with the sky, and with certain elements, like the still, a couple of the stills we're using are actually in front of a building, you notice, on the O'Connell Street Bridge in Dublin, which is quite iconic, and that building is actually the Heineken building. So I got a font that looks very close. I didn't steal the Heineken font. And I rearranged the letters to say here again, on the building, to make the world feel quite strange, because she this is her first time bringing her mind back in time to when she was 40 to look at it, and she kind of looks like, okay, I need to go back into this place and this moment and this feeling. It's like, the way you associate Christmas with certain smells and that kind of stuff. I think memories, like good and bad, you associate particular feelings with them. So she's going back in time, and I suppose, although visually I could do a lot of that work with the style of the film, what the actors had to do was to imply that this was happening in their heads, and in their minds. So you'll notice, like, about Claire Loy, who plays younger Maura, Anya Ní who plays older Maura, and I think they look so alike. I was just delighted with myself that I found people that had such likeness in them, but they've got the most amazing eyes. They're just so intense, and what I noticed about Claire is, she changes her head or her just slightly, and she looks very different, and she's so intense and kind of stormy looking. But then Anya Ní, who's actually a really good theatre actor in Ireland, she's prolific. She's been in all the old Irish series and stuff, and she is that bit older, but she's actually much, much smaller in size. And so, although you don't really cop it because she's sitting down, because of course she's being interviewed for her thing, you notice this kind of stormy woman and then the quiet, meek, kind of settled person she's become. And it was the contrast between the two of them that I think I really wanted to get through, because you're dealing with 2 different versions of the same person. You're dealing with someone who's very stormy and very conflicted and isn't sure of herself and doesn't have very much self-confidence. And then you're dealing with someone who's got this fantastic sense of self, but who has to let herself be vulnerable in order to share that experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think Michael David McKernan, who played the interviewer as well, with so opposite Anya Ní, he was very, very tall, so I had to get him to I didn't realize how tall he was until I met him, but he had to kind of hunker down into the scene and really immerse himself in her story. So his stature was very important to me, but also his eyes are very important, and him and Anya both have very gorgeous voices. So although we're with them in a lot of the interview scenes, like, we rely on like their eye contact when nothing is being said, because again, like, this stuff is so hard to communicate. It's kind of in between the lines with the really important bits. But as their voices talk over history, I think it keeps reiterating again and again how important it is that history is being told, as something that's happened. Like, it's fantastic that it did happen. It's a fictional film, but like, it's the talking of it and it being a positive thing. And even though Maura has to go back to a place of conflict and maybe kind of embarrassment, and it's so difficult, because even when she makes the good decisions, like to go with Amy, like, yes, I'll go with you. You need to move away. I'll go with you for your job. I mean, that's the essence of the film. Having to go back to that, I find that there's this guilt in, like, oh my God, I've wasted so much time. So, in stories where you've not allowed yourself to love, even when you finally let yourself do it, there's always an element of sadness. And so I suppose setting up the 3 of them in a way that they could communicate that emotionally was really, really important. And I think it worked. I think, like, balancing that thing of the voice their eyes, how they look, and then how their postures relate to each other kind of across time, and also in the interview. I think that they all have to kind of fit together, you know.
Yeah, great, thank you. And with the style's very I'm not sure what the word I'm looking for is, but it's very unique. It's got a really great look to it, and I feel like there's two parts of the films, and you've got that kind of initial present day. Is it it's 2000 is
like 2050-ish. Yeah, that's present day. So it's like the time that we're in now, like 2020 is the past. Yeah.
And that's got this kind of like orange and slightly surreal, but you don't really know why it's surreal. It's just got a look, a orangey kind of glow to it, and then you've got the future, which is kind of grey and blue, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. And I wondered why you chose those colours, those styles, and why you decided to go with an almost kind of sci-fi feel to the film.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I think like going into the future, you always look at like Blade Runner, the second one had come out around the time that I was finishing the script, and there was just these blue posters like everywhere. You couldn't get away from them. And I remember I didn't watch the new one just on principle, but I remembered the old one where you had that contrast of orange and blue kind of for the mechanical stuff and for the emotional stuff. So I think like those two colours complement each other so well, because we always associate kind of the blue sterile stuff, like firstly with like medical stuff and being examined and being looked at and being kind of poked at in a way that we're often not comfortable with. Like it reminded me of when all the posters were up for the marriage referendum with these horrible slogans on them, and it felt very invasive. You know, I felt like I was at the dentist or something, you know, or something more uncomfortable than that while they were up. And so it kind of, I think that sterile environment where like I call it the intimate parts of private people, and it's actually a line in the film. You know, I feel like my sexuality and my identity and my romantic life and, you know, my sense of self and my value are none of your business, quite frankly. But we have to, there does come a point where if we want to better our situation, we do have to talk about it. So I think a bit of that did inform the blue in the interview scene, but also it's kind of a visual shorthand, isn't it, for the future. Like that window's not there in the interview scene either. It's there was this horrible, crappy looking grey roof. That's my office I work in. And my colleague works in that. Director of finance let me use his office. I was delighted with myself. But that window, there was actually a fella holding a clamp outside the window, and all you could see was his hands and his legs for the whole scene. So halfway through, I was like, I wish I hadn't done the special effect with the window. But I was like, I can't take it out because you're going to see Tommy holding a bounce outside. You know, it was really funny. But so that window is just there to make it like to close in the room even more, but also to control the color system as well. So that river isn't actually there. The bridges aren't actually there. That's all bits that we crop together from different images to make an iconic look of Dublin and what it might look like in the future by taking little bits away and putting bits in. And I suppose having her like interfere with that image and cross over it several times, it just kind of hits home that she can't control the world she's in, you know. Whereas the stuff in like the past, like I wanted it to be more warm and orange, and the blacks are really, really strong as well, but just to hit home like the depth of the emotion. But it's like, you know, the Valerie's letter sequence of V for Vendetta, it was kind of based on that as well. You know, when he's passing her the letters on the toilet paper through the wall, and she's bald and she's sick, Natalie Portman's character is, and she's so upset, and yet she can't help imagining this life to be the most warm, beautiful thing just because it's written so beautifully and it's about love. So that was definitely part of it, and like to put such a strong grain on that as well is imply that it's the past, and just to show that like even in all the suffering of it, you know, even before she accepts the fact that Amy wants to be with her and she goes with her, there's this absolute beauty to like the potential of what she could be, you know. And because like I spoke to someone from LGBT Ireland actually before this, like Paula Fagan is the CEO, and I was chatting to her about older people, and she said that like there was an older man in rural Ireland who fell in his house, and he's not out, but like he's hiding it from everybody, but he's in touch with LGBT Ireland, and he laid on his floor for 3 days before he was found because he was too embarrassed to call anyone because he felt like he had no one to call. And I suppose it's that sense of shame. Like imagine him laying on the floor like a baby in an incubator with all this potential, all, you know, this emotion to give, and not being able to do it. And as sad as it is, it's a beautiful image. It kind of reminds me of you know, like a child sleeping, you know, that kind of way. So I suppose there was the potential for beauty was also in that, even though there was natural warmth and there was romance and there was joy and there was, all that stuff as well. And then how it contrasted to the blue, as the two had to kind of balance off each other.
Thank you very much. What do you think were the main challenges of making this film for you?
Got all of it, all of it. Like, it was my first film, so for a first film, it's a daft thing to do. Stupid. Don't do it. Like, don't write a film that has loads of different scenes and loads of different characters and loads of visual effects. Just don't do it. Don't do it to yourself. Like, I've gone so grey right since making this. But so I suppose it was because I'm a producer in my day job for a learning company, so I'm used to doing schedules and I'm used to coordinating people and all that kind of thing. But it's different when it's your baby, and it's different when you're doing it with very little help. So, like, I hadn't proven my worth as a director. I hadn't so the people that I had, really good people, brilliant, but kind of get people on, pay them. It's not like it's your buddies and you've kind of set something up through Facebook, and I wanted to make a really good go of it. And I suppose when you do that and you put all your money in it, the stress levels just automatically go up because you're so worried that it's not going to work out, and you feel like you're gambling. When you see someone and they gamble and they're kind of waiting and it's only a 30-second wait to see if they've won or not, I had that wait for months, and it was a lot of pressure. And admittedly, I put it on myself, but also, and it paid off, thankfully, really, but I would just say for your first film, do something a little bit simpler. Like, for me, the shoot went relatively well, and then when it came to VFX and stuff, there was a couple of technical mistakes which like I had no control over, but I was like, okay, I need to deal with this now. And I had to work 18 hours a day for 6 weeks straight, no weekend breaks, nothing, to get the VFX done on time to submit to Galway, because that's what I told myself I wanted to do. And I think that was the hardest bit, was the post-production. Like, we did our best, and everyone on the team worked so hard on it as well. But with a short, especially when it's independent, there's only so much you can ask of people. Eventually, you have to finish it on your own, particularly when it comes to post-production. Like, I was lucky, I've got like a good laptop, which I actually melted the battery on my laptop trying to render out stuff on time for a festival one time as well. And all the hard drives were connected to it as well, and I didn't have any backups. It was, do you know what I mean? That's the post-production hell. And I suppose lots of people, I've met lots of directors at festivals now who have experiences like that, but they don't talk about them. Like, people say, oh, it was great, it was as smooth as butter, my film. No, it didn't. Everyone has one or two little issues, which I think we need to talk about a little bit more. But yeah, for me, the post-production was quite stressful. But as I said, thank God it worked out. It's not like I've got a couple of friends like who finish films and who won't show them to people, and who won't kind of submit them anywhere. But thankfully, like, that's absolutely the opposite for this one,
And what is it that you want viewers to take away from this film?
I think what I wanted to communicate with it was just a feeling, which is it's an emotion. Like, I think when I look at people arguing on social media, like, about the ins and outs of, like, this thing with J.K. Rowling, and trans rights and stuff, and like, without getting into the nitty-gritty of it, like, I think any LGBTQI issue, particularly when it comes to gender or when it comes to someone's experience, unless you've lived that experience, you're not going to understand it. But the problem is we can't just make queer stories for queer people. And what I would love to do is to say, okay, this is the story and this is what happened, but every single bit, every prop, every costume, every musical note in the score that Emer did, every line of dialogue, what I want to communicate to you is just a feeling, because I can't make you understand my experience, but I can certainly make you feel what I do. So I think that feeling of the loneliness and the regret and feeling lost and feeling like, it's exactly as you said, the 2019 world, the 2020 world, it feels strange and you don't really know why. And it's just that slight level of discomfort where you look like, I don't really belong here. I think that's a very hard thing to communicate, particularly to other people, even people I went to school with who were in my classes. And they were like, we had no idea this was going on for you. And I was like, well, yeah, why would you? But I felt completely, you feel like you're kind of on edge all the time. So I'd love to communicate that, and I would love to just get people thinking about older LGBTQ people, because there have been people who've come up to me after festivals, and even straight women who've said, I have never seen a woman like myself carry a short or carry a feature, of my age, and just talk about who she is and her feelings. She's always part of some man's story, or she's always part of some historical event that we've already heard 2 or 3 times. So those are the two. It's the emotional experience of what it is to live gay, to live frightened and isolated, and then to consider the fact that, like, we didn't just emerge out of the egg when people started to talk about gay rights. You know what I mean? Like, there have been gay people around forever, and some of them are really, you know, they're older and they're isolated and they're alone, and they'll probably never see films like this, and they mightn't even know they exist. And I find that so drastically unfair.
And I know it would be a big challenge because obviously you've just explained the 18-hour days that you did to get it finished, but
Yeah.
would you consider developing it for a feature length? Do you think it's...
Yeah, actually, I've had a good few people ask me this because there's a lot in it. You know, like even the actors in the film, like Sarah Kinlan in particular, has come to a few festivals with me because she's based in Dublin as well. And she says that, like, watching the film, even having been in it and having read the script, she notices things 3 or 4 times in that she didn't see before. Like, the film is 17 minutes long, and but the edit that I was most happy with was 35 minutes long, and that's with dropping 2 scenes. Like, I think part of how I set it up was I wanted a lot of time for people to just have no dialogue and just look at each other and just feel the moment and just have the editing be nice and slow. And you know, so if my edit that was 35 minutes, if I had put the extra 2 scenes in that I had to cut, I would have been verging on 45, you know, nearing an hour. I think a couple of extra scenes, and I would love to have seen more time with Claire Loy's character, which is the younger version of Maura, on her own, kind of adding a bit more explanation, because it in a way it is quite cryptic. It's a cryptic film, as I said, because it's, you know, it's about emotion as opposed to kind of feeding people a very specific story. But like, if I went onto the hard drives, even though I never want to look at them again, right? But if I went back to them and had a look at the project files, I could definitely pull together something that's kind of close enough to feature length, and then patch it in quite easily with a couple of more scenes. At the same time, I think, like, I've put a couple of years into it now at this stage, you know, and I've got other shorts that are kind of coming up. So yeah, like, I think I'd wait until I've got a couple of features done and then maybe come back to that one, because there is huge potential there. But you know, I don't want to sit with it for so long that I get tired of it, you know, that kind of way. But yeah.
And are you working on any projects at the moment?
Yeah, I've got loads going on. I've been telling everyone that I should have been locked into the house ages ago because I'm so productive now. I'm shocked at myself. I feel great. But so like, I've got my full-time job as a producer, which is like an ongoing thing with HMH. I help produce audio and video for the US education system. But I've got a film that's going into it's in post-production now. We should have been finished it well before lockdown. I was the co-writer on it. It's a feature film called Lily, about a young girl in her final year of school in Ireland who kind of realises who she is and has to go through the coming out process. And that's based on an award-winning short of the same name. It was nominated for an IFTA and it went all over the place. It's directed by Graham Cantwell, and he co-wrote the feature script with me. And like, what I love about that film, like, I've seen the rough cut, I haven't seen the finished thing obviously because it's not ready, but Graham, being a straight 40-year-old man, had done this short with students he was teaching as part of, I think it was a master's program. And when the film did so well that when he wanted to make it into a feature, he said, listen, like, he's quite well established over here, and he just said, look, I'm a straight 40-year-old man. I could do this, but this needs like a lesbian voice. It needs someone who understands it and someone who knows what their feelings are and what they're going through, and I want someone who's lived it. And so, despite, like, I haven't even done my first short at this stage, I was still writing it and kind of going into post-production, and yet he brought me onto this feature film and gave me this huge opportunity. So, and I got to work closely with the actors. Like, we had a sex scene in the film as well. He brought me in for that, to help direct it as well with the lovely team that he had, you know. So I'm really excited about that, and I just think what I love about it is how he approached it, you know, like bringing on someone who's like, no, you know what you're talking about, you know, experience wise anyway. And then as regards like my life experience, you know, and then as regards the writing, there was lovely back and forth. There was none of this kind of like, you're new and I'm not, you know. So that feature film should be out next year, which I'm really excited about. And then I've got funding for 2 more shorts during lockdown. So the first one is called Focal Balla Cree. It's Irish for Words, Home and Heart, and it's another kind of an art house story. And this is, there was funding available for films that were written in the Irish language. Like, we don't speak Gaelic over here, really, you know, like, we have to do it for school and we hate it. Like, we hate it, right? I hated it as well. But during lockdown, I was like, sure, feck it, I have nothing to do, I'll learn Irish. So I've got this lovely big window in front of me here, and it was like, you know, that scene in A Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe where the wife walks in and he kind of looks at her and he's got stuff all over the walls. My room looked like that for 2 months, and I wrote this script, and I was determined I would do it by myself and with Google Translate or whatever. Got it to an acceptable enough standard that I got shortlisted, and then had a translator just proofread stuff. And my granddad died in the middle of me writing that film, and so I got to bring his character into it a little bit. And it's about a dad who's imagining his life with his son and all the words he's going to teach him, partly because I could only do baby talk in Irish, but also because I think it's lovely to look forward to the future and whatever. But as part of this future, he's imagining his son growing up and falling in love, and he imagines his son is gay, and he imagines his heart flying across the room when he kisses his husband in the garden and this kind of stuff. And he, so we go from this baby literally being like up on his shoulder to getting married to a man, to the grandfather passing away and the husband being in bed with him while he's crying and this kind of stuff. Because what his dad said is like, a home is made of many things and we can put all these words on them, and the irony of that is that it all adds up to love and grief, and we can't talk about those things at all. And it's very, very quick. It's almost written like a poem. And so like the reason that I put that queer character in there is because although we can write as many films as we want, kind of reacting to negative experiences and explaining what those bad experiences have been and flipping them on their heads, it's like, why wouldn't you imagine your child being gay? Like, let it not be the story that's tolerated, but let it be the story that we imagine and that we want. I'd love to get to that stage. And the last one it's called Lambing, and I won the IMDb Script to Screen Award through Film Bath with this a couple of weeks ago, which was completely dark. It was so much fun. But that is about an intersex baby that's born in rural Ireland. So I wrote the Irish one on the back of this one because I want to develop this into a feature as well. And so I was just looking at the father figure from different angles, to be honest. But this one is about a young couple in rural Ireland whose first baby is arriving, like very small town. Kind of not very open-minded, and I think they're having a little boy, and then the baby is born and the doctor says, look, I actually don't know. And the parents have to go through this horrific process, which actually happens in Ireland, where for 10 days you're not allowed to tell anyone what's going on. You're not allowed to name your baby. You're not allowed to say you've had a boy or a girl. And it's just this grueling thing of being just disconnected from everyone, because that reaction, even though medically it might be the right thing to do, is completely rooted in shame. And we shouldn't be trying to erase intersex. We should be trying to understand it, and we should be celebrating it, and we should completely rid ourselves of that ridiculous embarrassment around gender that's challenged, or the boundaries that have been pushed. Because what happens is these babies, which are, when the ambiguity is so significant that the doctors actually can't tell which way they should go, are basically castrated in one direction over the other, and you've got no guarantee that this baby isn't going to reach age 12, 13 and realize, like, mom, like, I'm in the wrong body, like, what's going on? And that has happened, so although I can't cover an entire lifetime in another short because it's too stressful, the Lambing does just focus on these parents and what they go through in the 10 days that they have to wait and to tell nobody, so that's the second short. And then kind of hopefully we'll get to produce those two shorts next year, like kind of lockdown depending. Like, we're not quite in lockdown at the moment, but like working with children and that kind of stuff, it's going to be a little bit more tricky. So next year, hopefully those two shorts and the feature will be out. And I'm optioning a children's book as well at the moment about a girl who's 9 years old and who's feeling the same-sex attraction. She calls it the fizzy feeling. I can't say what the book is now at the moment yet, because it's not all finalized, but she calls it the fizzy feeling. It's so cute. And she's just has this one particular friend that she gets the fizzy feeling for, and it's, the whole book is written like a poem, and she just needs to, she's just trying to understand it, that's all. And so I would love to develop that into a feature film and add more characters and family and whatever. And I've spoken to the original writer of it as well, and she's kind of on board, but like, you never know how these things are going to work out. So that's kind of, I'm working on getting that pushed through at the minute. If I do, great. If not, no problem.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Lots of very interesting projects you have going on. I guess for my last question before I let you go, is there any queer film or filmmaker or character that you felt you could identify with or represented you whilst you were growing up? Anything that stood out to you?
I had that question and I meant to think about it. I suppose weirdly, like, yeah, I identified with lots of boys growing up. I mean, I think a lot of people have that thing, like I'm in this one group chat with lots of lesbians where they keep sending each other Leonardo DiCaprio memes because apparently he's the only man any lesbian would love, and we all identified with him in Romeo and Juliet. So he's got the Hawaiian shirt on and he's crying. But yeah, no, I suppose, to be honest, I didn't really have many like lesbian role models or whatever growing up because they just weren't there. Like, I grew up in like, I'm living in Dublin now in Ireland, but I'm from Kerry, which is like down the bottom, and very, very much behind the times even now. I hate to say it. So yeah, I suppose not really. Like, for me, it was always reading books and forgetting about whether the character was male or female, but identifying with the spirit of them. And people who really wanted to express themselves and be creative, and people who were really wild and just did what they wanted to do. You know, that maybe that's not a great answer, but I suppose, and then every lesbian in the land has said it. Portrait of a Lady on Fire completely shook me when I saw it. But again, that's, I suppose, because my background is academic. Like I did a master's in film studies, but it was totally theoretical. Like I've got no practical training at all. So that's, I suppose, where all the visual metaphors come into my own film about like looking and being seen. And so I've listened to like every interview I can find with the director about, you know, her looking at the painter, looking at her ex-girlfriend, who's, you know, the actor who's also looking at her and looking at the painter, and this thing of let's just look at each other. I loved it. I absolutely did, and like all the silence in it, and how they use music, and you know what I mean. That the Portrait of a Lady on Fire, I think, in some ways is a really academic film. So I think it's like a brain scratch. You know what I mean? Like I felt completely and utterly like my brain had been scratched after watching it, and then I was also like, feck her anyway, making that before me. Like I wanted to make that film, and she's after going ahead and doing it, you know. So yeah, I can't wait to see what she does next, because I mean the funding, I think that it's Siama is how you pronounce her surname, isn't it? I think yeah,
I think so. Yeah.
Siama, yeah, cut that bit out, but yeah, I think the funding she's going to get for her next film is just so well deserved, and I just can't wait to see what she does next. You know, like if I could have gone back to Portrait of a Lady on Fire 2 or 3 times in the cinema, I would have.
Yeah.
But I think the lockdown happened straight after. I think, yeah, it was not too long beforehand, I think.
No, I think we watched it in London, and then maybe 2 weeks later it was lockdown. Otherwise, I'm sure we'd have gone and watched it again.
Yeah, it's the last film I saw in the cinema before lockdown, so thank God I got that out of the way. I cried by myself like an idiot. There was myself and one older man sitting beside me, and I actually handed him my hanky, which now in COVID times you would never do, but we did. Yeah.
Brilliant. I think that's all of my questions. So thank you so much for joining us for this, and thank you for sharing your film with us. I'm very excited for you that it's going to so many festivals. It's at Outfest next, which is happening
from Sunday. From Sunday.
Brilliant. So thank you very much for joining us. To everyone else that's just watched this, thank you as well for joining us for this. Please do watch In Orbit. It is available at our festival until Sunday, so you can watch it with us and then come back and watch the Q&A with Katie to find out more about the film. But thanks for joining. Bye.